how are you and yourself at the moment?
I'm pretty good, thank you, yes.
Yes. Ready for a conversation?
Hopefully, yes.
Good, okay. Excellent.
Yes.
So what would you like to talk about, Mama?
Well, I took early retirement last year and I promised myself a gap year, and I'm coming towards the end of that. And I'm sort of thinking, okay, now where do I go from here? How fast should I be moving into the next phase, or do I just program in another gap year? And what is it I want to use the time for? I very much had a vision that I'd be moving into a sort of third career when I retired, and things are sort of a bit slower than I anticipated for all sorts of reasons. So it's about, well, what might that third career look like, and how much of a hurry am I to get there, and yeah, all of that sort of transition really from one thing to another.
So where has your thinking taken you to so far?
Well, it was interesting because when I retired, I thought, oh, I've got this time off. I'll be happy doing this, that and the other. And I was doing a bit of academic writing, and I thought, well, I'll do a bit of volunteering. I'm involved in a charity shop, and I'm quite involved in a debt counselling service, or I thought I would be much more involved in a debt counselling service than I have been. And both of those things, I thought, oh, I'll go and get stuck in those. And actually, when I sort of started to do a bit there, I thought, no, this doesn't feel quite right. And I don't know whether that's just because I wasn't ready for it, or whether there was just other stuff going on for me, that I wasn't wanting to spend that much time with people in the same way, because my work before I left was quite intensive. It was an academic role, but there was also management, and there was also firefighting and all that other sort of messy stuff. You know, we'll just move on from that. So my thinking now is much more about how will I best move forward. Coaching, mentoring, I've had sort of a little bit to do with, but not as much as I thought I would. But I still feel that that's an area that I might move more into. I've also been thinking about recreating my own community, because particularly in London, it's very difficult to have a community. People go out to work all day. If they don't, then they're busy doing other things. And when you go in and you close the door, that's it. You can be quite isolated. So recreating a community that I can live and work amongst is actually quite important to me. But I've not had the sort of emotional and physical resources over this last year, as much as I thought I would have, to pour myself into that. So I've been recharging my batteries, if you like. So I'm thinking about, well, how can I do some of this stuff, if you like? What can I get into? I'm also, the mentoring I have done is much more around my local church and spiritual mentoring and friendship. But it's been quite tentative so far.
It sounds to me from the description you gave me that things like mentoring, coaching, anything, any of the things you've just described, they're a means towards an end, but I can't actually envision what that end is.
Well, part of it is, I think, about people in terms of enabling, supporting, encouraging them to grow a bit, to I don't know, find themselves, find a purpose in life, and so that there is a spiritual element to this. But it's also about, what is it about? It's something about finding fulfillment in working with other people, and yet much of what I like to do is with things rather than with people, and that's been quite a surprise to me. But again, I just don't know whether that's just the point of me recharging my batteries or quite what that's been about. So that's still sort of going through my mind about where am I and what am I doing at this point. So I can't really answer that question fully, I would say, that the sort of long-term purpose.
Because that would be the next thing. What is your personal purpose? What would help you begin to put some solidity around that personal purpose?
Yeah, I guess it's because I'm still feeling very much in transition. When you've been an academic for 19 years, it's quite hard to put all of that down. And there are some things of that I really enjoyed and, didn't want to put down. But there were some things that I was very happy to lay to rest. And so some of it, that the need to sort of isolate and be introvert, in terms of writing and reading, I still need that. But I'm not doing very much of that at the moment. I'm doing reading, but it's not necessarily the same quality as I was doing before. So, it's some of that purpose is about having something to offer other people, something to give. Also to make a connection on a number of levels, both physical and emotional, but also in a spiritual sense as well, to get to people's depths, because I think that's important for, too much of life is spent at a fast pace on a physical level, and not a lot goes on sort of on the emotional level, and not a lot goes on underneath that on the spiritual level. And I think to try and get people to engage with themselves on all levels actually is a good place to be.
So there are many ways you could do that.
Absolutely.
It's finding a vehicle for doing that. Yeah. Okay. Can I suggest we try a little experiment? Yeah. And what I'm going to do is to draw two lines on the flip chart here. On one side, I'd like you to think about the things that you're trying to move away from. And the things that you're trying to move towards on the other side. So if you were to take the pen and put down, what are the things that you're trying to move away from, or what are the things you're trying to move towards?
Management.
Okay.
Or rather, imposed management.
Yeah.
I suppose towards much more of self-management, which I do a lot myself, but towards helping others self-manage.
Yeah.
If I put and others, it's a sort of broader thing. I'm trying to move away from perhaps things being imposed on me to things that I can choose. So again, imposed and choice. And I also, I had quite a lot of flexibility in my previous role, and it was very much about a can-do attitude. And that actually hasn't changed. I'm very happy to be flexible. I'm happy to go with the flow. So flexibility and responsiveness are very much me. And that's almost part of my dilemma, because I go with the flow. Whatever comes,
it's too much.
It's too easy. It's too easy to say, well, somebody else set the agenda, and I don't need that. But it is about seeing the opportunities, and I don't know quite what that opportunity is, but I'll know it when I see it. Which is why I'm saying I'm still in that transition phase, and maybe I'm not quite ready to jump yet, because there's still this check in me about, actually, I don't have the emotional resources just at the moment to get involved in whatever that, the full package of that.
I'm sensing that one should repackage this. Are you trying to move away from seeking opportunities to actually having opportunities find you?
Yes, I think that would be, quite a good way of putting it, yes. Yeah. So, can't spell on here.
No, they've never put a spell checker on the flip charts. You notice?
Yeah.
What else?
I think there's something about working with individuals.
This is towards or away?
Working towards them. But I also was working quite a lot with individuals before, though there were groups. And it wasn't always doing things that I really, really wanted to do. Although I did a lot in education and teaching, I don't know how I got in there. It was almost by accident and by design, but that's another story. So maybe it's not that I'm trying to get away from groups either, because there are times, you know, I was talking about my community, so that is a group. So maybe it's more about a defined community. I'm not sure about that. And more about relationships, relationships of choice, possibly. It's quite a challenging thinking about this, actually. What is it I'm leaving behind, or wanting to leave behind, and what is it I really want to move towards? And I'm still very much on that bridge.
Yes, and it sounds to me as though now is not the time necessarily to make a decision. It's about understanding more and more of the context until the time that you're ready to make a decision.
Yes. I'm scanning the horizon still a bit. Yes.
But is this helpful as a methodology of thinking about it?
Yes, it is, because it's, you know, when I'm thinking, for example, of things that are imposed upon me and things that I can choose. And when you've worked in the public sector for a long time, you have so much that is put upon you. And it's quite difficult to make that choice of your own volition. And, you know, like I say, you choose sometimes to apply for a job, and then you don't necessarily appreciate all the finer things that come in a job description. So it's about having that freedom, that flexibility to pursue something that you want to. And I was doing writing, for example, previously, and I'd still quite like to do some writing. But again, the subject matter of it would be quite different, and I'm still sort of not really sure about what that might be. So towards more writing would be quite helpful too, I think.
Okay. Now I suspect you're going to develop this list as you go along, and you'll put more and more into it.
Yes.
I think it might be helpful to round this off by just taking a look at this word community.
Yes.
Which keeps recurring. It's clearly important to you. What do you personally mean by the word community?
People I can relate to, people I can engage with, people I can have fun with, people I can have in-depth conversations with, you know, that balance of feeling comfortable with people as well as being stimulated with them and by them and for them, you know, that you've got something to offer, something to share, and yet it's sort of a bit like a team, a family that you work with. It's sort of an extension of that, really. And
so it's an extension of your identity through... Yeah.
Yes. And they may not sort of identify me as sort of having a particular identity other than a retired person at the moment. But it'd be quite nice to have that identity as sort of as a person in my own right, without necessarily coming with all the academic hats on or with all the past history hats or any of that. It's because I'm who I am.
And so this community is... Are you looking to create this community, or are you looking to find this community?
I think I'm looking to find the community, but possibly to create it in terms of building it up, making new connections, making reconnections with people I've known over the past, locally, possibly wider afield, I don't know. I mean, having retreated quite a lot over the last year, it's almost like, well, I will be... In due course, I will be ready to, you know, go into a wider community. But how wide that community is, I don't know. And
to what extent does this community need to have a purpose that binds it together?
Yeah, I think there will need to be some kind of purpose about it. There needs to be a value in it. And there may, interestingly, within the community, there may be different sort of aspects of it.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, I may be part of it as part of a church community, part of it as part of perhaps a coaching or mentoring, part of it perhaps as a singing, or, you know, part of it doing something else. And it's about me finding a role within that and building around me again things that I can relate to, things that help to just give me a quality of life that I'm looking for. Yeah.
So something to work on there.
Yes.
It'll be a work in progress for a while, I suspect.
I think it probably is, yes.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you very much, that's helpful. Yes.
So I'll be happy to make an introduction for you too.
Yeah, that'd be really good, yes.
Okay. So Barbara, your perceptions from that session?
Yeah, no, it was really helpful in terms of helping me sort of verbalise some of the stuff I've been thinking about, and it was useful doing it in that way because I could see that they were, well, I'm perhaps trying to get away from one part of my life. It's still coming after me, but perhaps not quite metamorphosised yet into where I'm going. So that process was useful, and it was good questions. It went in a direction I didn't expect it to. So yes, thank you. It was helpful. Yeah.
Okay. Observations?
Well, I think when you did stand up and introduce the activity, the energy did change a little bit. And I did think it helped focus on differentiating the away from and the moving towards to, which I think was helpful. You were getting there in the conversation sitting down, but I think the activity accelerated the specifics to get you to be specific, which I think was very helpful. One thing I did wonder actually was, Barbara mentioned a couple of times about retreating and the emotional energy, not really having that this year. I did wonder, David, why you didn't explore those two issues particularly around, you said a few times, I don't feel I have the emotional energy now, and the last year I've retreated quite a lot. And I did wonder, that was why.
I was concerned that if I dug into those too deeply at this point, it might become too emotional. Right. And we might not, and we might actually lose the opportunity to really get at some structures.
Yeah.
But had we been having a much longer conversation, I think that they undoubtedly would have picked up on that, because there's clearly some things going on or have been going on in your life which have taken away your impetus to some extent. But digging into those right now didn't seem to me that the right time, that would have been rushing into those things. And I think it would have stopped us getting into having this conversation, getting a sense of a framework around where you are. Now, underneath this, we could actually look, well, how would you actually, what would all these things mean?
Yes.
And I think we would have come pretty quickly to those issues then. But it's always a judgment as a mentor as to when you pick up on clues, you notice them, you put them in your mind, but you say, is this the right time to dig more deeply into that one?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I found it really interesting that, like we were talking about the language and you picked up on the community thing and you decided to probe that a little bit. And from that, a lot of things came out. And maybe there was a little bit of an identity there and about, the community, which is important, but maybe you haven't had enough time to give to the community you want around you. So that was interesting. Was there any particular reason you chose that?
Well, it's the fact that the phrase the word was used a number of times, but I could also see when you talked about that, you became slightly more energised, and therefore this had particular impact for you. And I think we all need community. It's an important part of defining us. And one of the things that we've been looking at a little bit recently is the loneliness of being a coach.
Yeah.
So professional coaches do tend to be. There is a loneliness because you sort of have to be self-contained, and so there is. I think we don't actually talk about loneliness a great deal. Again, it's an emotional topic to explore, but it would be certainly one, as one gets older, the potential for loneliness becomes greater. Particularly as if we've been parents and we've had lots of children,
Yeah.
We all have,
Yeah.
and they've gone. That connectedness has gone. That intensity of relationships. So there's a lot of issues here. If one's reorienting oneself, we need to be able to. There's lots of conversations we need to have, basically.
There are a lot of challenges in a transition time. Finding your identity, where you spend your energies, what excites you, what gives you peace. All of these things you have to sort of seek back in yourself to find, and a lot of people will try and manage it through different processes, sort of whether that's being terribly extrovert or having loads of holidays, or I know quite a lot of retired people who keep going on holidays, but they come back just the same, and they're still frustrated with where they're at. And I think actually I'd far rather find peace at home and peace in myself and have that constantly, and then I can go away and do what I want to do, but I know where my centre is, if you like.
Yeah.
So it's finding that centering.
There's a question I sometimes ask you is, how do you care for yourself? And particularly when we go through times of transition, it's an important question, to have enough energy to care for ourselves.
Yes. Yes. And giving yourself time to do that.
Yeah.
And it's very counterintuitive in this day and age to actually step out of a busy role, a busy life, and say, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that. It's, as you said at the beginning of your session, I'm very busy.
Yeah.
And, actually sometimes that's not always the best place to be, because we need to have time to reflect. We need to have time to recharge our batteries and to reconsider our priorities. And that can happen when you have coaching, or mentoring, because it has, that's what people say they value, is that time, isn't it?
Yeah.
To step back and think and notice where they are.
Thank you.
Thank you.